Good morning. Good morning. So good to see you again this morning. Right on time as usual.
Hello. Yes, it's good to see you again.
So, why don't you tell me a bit about when you were a child? I think that's where we left off last time. So, let's go back all the way back to, well, not the very beginning, but back to the beginning.
Okay, that sounds good. Sure. I guess when I was a kid, well, I'm from Greenwich, Connecticut. Born and raised. And as you know, I went to Harvard Business School. Um, and I would say when I was a child, you know, as for every child, certain things don't go your way, and you have to learn to navigate that. And sure, it was very disappointing when things didn't go my way, but I would say that I'm more of a problem solver. So I would try to fix that immediately.
So, yes, I understand that, a problem solver. That answers a lot of questions. I have thought about that when I was listening to you from the last session. So, yes, a problem solver can grow up to be a person that likes control. And sometimes there's nothing really wrong with liking control and keeping things in order and keeping things in perspective, but sometimes you can take it a little bit too far. So that is really valuable information as we move forward in our sessions to realize that was your base idea, personality, thoughts, and concerns to be in control. So I do understand where you're coming from when you fill in that little bit of background information for me.
Well, I'm being an only child. I feel like most people would assume that you wouldn't have to fight for attention in your home, and that just is not true. Um, we grew up differently than most people in our neighborhood. I had to deal with a lot of challenges that most of my classmates and peers did not. For example, just because I'm an only child doesn't mean that my parents were financially in the same place as other people, if you know what I mean. Um, Most of my friends and classmates, they were vacationing in Cabo, and we only could go to the Cape. So it was just childhood was just very difficult. We did not have a live-in nanny. We had a nanny who would I had a nanny growing up as a child who would come and then leave at night, and all of my other classmates had live-in nannies. So I just felt like I always grew up in a very different world from everyone else around me.
Yes. I can understand that when you're filling in those details. That's exactly what I want to know. That answers questions also. That gives me an idea of your environment that you grew up in. So, yes, being different, seeing yourself as different from your friends and peers in school can also lead to ideas of wanting control, wanting to fix the situation or change the situation that you find yourself in, even as a child. Even as a child, children learn quickly, and sometimes they learn even more quickly from their peers than they do from their parents. So that answers a lot for me. And let's continue. Let's continue. Go ahead and give me a few more details. Let's go back into details of your childhood.
Okay, so with conflict, for example, I feel like there wasn't too much conflict. My parents were working a lot, but I would say that as opposed to people in my home having conflict and putting that on me as the child, I would put that on them. I've been managing things since I was 10 years old. I pretty much ran our household and gave our nanny her schedule every day. You know how children have those star charts or a star jar where if they're on good behavior, they would fill up their jar or put a star on the chart to track their progress. I made those for my parents and our nanny and our housekeeper to make sure that everyone was doing what they needed to be doing in the household. Yes. I would say that I had the control in our household. Um, I was comfortable with that, and I took that on wholeheartedly as a strong minded 10-year-old. Yes.
So I see, as a 10-year-old, 8, 9, 10, you were basically organizing your household. So you learned early on that control and seeing that people are doing what they're supposed to be doing is a good thing. And that's really a way that I think that developed your personality and developed how you wanted or want to see the world. And I can see that relating to your employment situation and the reason you're here in court appointed therapy, because you realize that that type of ultimate control is not achievable outside of your maybe household, family, close relatives, or friends, where you can dictate that control over people who allow you to. But then when you enter the workforce, you see that no, you no longer have that. So I know it's difficult. And that's something that we're going to work on. Again, like I mentioned in our last session, once the underlying issues are laid out in front of me, we can start to work together on these trigger issues. I like to say trigger issues because what I'm hearing from you is that you were set up as a child, 8, 9, 10, to have more responsibilities than a normal child. Something that's unheard of, setting schedules for the nanny, setting schedules for your mother and father, setting your own schedule. So that's a lot to handle at the young age of 10. So I can see how that could lead you to your current situation where you don't have that control. And it's difficult to deal with. But that's something we can work on. That is something that we can work on.
You know, it's funny that you should say that because I actually don't feel like I was ever wrong growing up. And I did say, now that I'm looking back on it, that I do think that being in control, that is how I felt relevant and how I felt, I guess, like I mattered.
Again, that's a lot for such a young lady to deal with. But when you get used to dealing with it, and from what I'm hearing, you dealt with it successfully. All the adults around you, your immediate family, were open to giving you that opportunity to control the schedules, control the nanny, for instance, control your mom and dad, and yourself. So once you got used to that, that's something that's hard to get away from. And that is giving me a lot of insight to what you and I in these sessions will need to work on. So these problems are something that we can deal with, and we will deal with them.
I do think that I had awareness that other children did not. I mean, most children, at 10 years old are not making star charts for their own parents and their nannies. And that might sound kind of ridiculous, but as a very type A person, I just don't think that that is. I think it's actually very wise and practical. And more children should probably be implementing that now. I would say that given my peculiarities and quirks, as my doctor liked to call them growing up, I don't think that necessarily put me in a great place socially as a child. You can imagine being already very hard growing up where I did, and with the background that I had, and just being different already from everyone else because of my parents and our lack of vacation luxury homes and our lack of a live-in nanny. It just there were a lot of things that already had me in a tough place as a child. But I do think when I look back, I probably was reacting in the best way that I knew possible at the time, and I was trying to be and thought of myself as very mature, and I do think that I was very mature. But I do also think that I was trying to manage the outcomes and probably micromanage a bit too much, especially for a 10-year-old child.
Yes, definitely. I'm glad you brought that up because that's one of the topics I was going to point to. Micromanagement. That's a problem for a lot of adults these days. A lot of supervisors, bosses, co-workers, even in college, you'll get put into a peer group and you're always going to have the one or two people who want to micromanage. We're supposed to work together on this project, the same thing in work, and you're going to have someone who wants to oversee every little bit of it. Every little bit. They want to make sure that it's going in the direction that they think it should go in. So micromanagement is something, again, that we can work on. We can work on that, and we will help you little by little, feel free enough to release control. Listen closely, to release control to other people without thinking that everything has to be the way you see it. We'll start with minor things. That's how I always work with persons who have issues with control. You start giving some of that control over to the other person. A lot of times it's husband and wife. Sometimes it's parents and children. That's something that you need to get used to because you won't be able to always have that control.
You know, middle school is normally a very tough time for all preteens, but I would have to say that I wasn't intimidated by other people at this point. I had dealt with my fair share of, bullies and things like that in elementary school. So by the time I went to middle school, I would just say that I was pretty much training to be a businesswoman at that point. Um, I wasn't included a lot, and I always said, and I still kind of believe, it's because everyone was scared or intimidated of me. And I wasn't included in a lot of birthday parties and social things, like how kids go to the movies and things like that after school. I mostly stuck to myself and, did things on my own or with our nanny Priscilla.
So yes, not having control and being left out once you realize that in school, the peer group of friends and classmates were not going to let you have that micromanagement ability over them and deciding what to do when, what to do here, what to do how. You weren't going to be given that power. So maybe part of the reason you were left out was because kids can pick up on other kids who want to run the show. And a lot of times kids don't like that. They don't like other kids trying to give them direction. Okay, they're already dealing with their parents, they're already dealing with their teachers, they're already dealing with so many issues where they don't have control. In school, they want to have their control. So when another student or another young person in their peer group tries to control, that's a reason that person gets left out. And I know it's difficult. Again, that's something that you and I will work on that. Yes, we will work on that.
Well, a lot of things like group projects at school, they were pretty difficult because I realized very early on that most people couldn't keep up with me. So I would single-handedly delegate everything in the group and I would take on the bulk of the responsibility. And I really didn't mind because I enjoyed being a leader, as I would like to say. Most people would say bossy, but I would like to rephrase that and say more of a leader, a strong, young, budding female entrepreneur. And I feel like that was probably on my heart from a very early age. There were things with, group chats and things from school. And I will say that I will admit that sometimes at the beginning it did kind of hurt to be left out of those things. But once you flip the perspective and you put it back onto jealousy and that everyone's actually just jealous of you, you're able to sleep at night,
So yes, being able to sleep at night, big issue, especially for young people. And if you feel that you're left out during the day with your peers at school and they see you as bossy, I should say, control, person who likes to control, a person who likes to lead the conversation, lead the play, lead the peer group or work session or group project that you're working on, then they want to avoid that. They want to leave you out. They want to leave you to the side to eat lunch alone. They want to leave you aside on the playground to sit alone. They don't want to involve you with things that happen outside of school. And that can be very difficult for young people to accept when they realize, oh, there was a birthday party and I wasn't invited again. Oh, there was a swim event at someone's house, a pool party, I wasn't invited. So as that continues, then naturally you try to find other ways to compensate for your control issues. I assume at home stayed the same. So you had an outlet for your need of control which carried over into your adulthood. So again, that's something that you and I will work on. So don't worry about that. That can be solved. I've dealt with this issue before, and I'm pretty sure that we can solve what needs to be solved. So we are going to move forward on that, and we will work on that. We got a long list of stuff here to work on, and we will solve those problems and give you tools and skills necessary to solve the issues.
I will say that I feel like, it was hard for me to let go of things. I would probably in turn ask more questions and be more inquiring as to why people were being so strange around me. I just think that it's rude to do that to other people, and so I would ask others in the class, why isn't Janessa inviting me to her party, or why am I being excluded out of this group chat? And that's just normal things as you're a teenager and things you have to navigate. So I just tried to move on. But I did ask around, and I asked questions to a lot of people. And a lot of my teachers even found it to be a little annoying, and they would say, "Caitlin, you really have to calm down and stop asking every 3 hours and messaging us on your laptop and with all of your other electronic devices. You have to stop contacting the school and asking these questions about your peers. This is a personal matter. You should handle this outside of the school." So I realized that I was involving my teachers too much, and that I really just needed to handle things on my own at that point.
So yes, that's very interesting. Once you realized that your teachers were not going to get involved with your situations outside of school, then you naturally felt that those situations could be handled by yourself. And since you had the childhood situation where you controlled your family and their schedule and their planning, then you probably were left to yourself a lot, and you didn't have people to go to bounce ideas off of, and you were able to go forward and solve those ideas on your own. So some of the skill sets that you learned to deal with school and not receiving help from your teachers is something you carried on into life. And it's part of the reason you're here with me today, is to find out how you can make those changes necessary to fit in with the group that you're a part of right now. So we can work on that. You and we can work on that. So don't worry about that. We will get this issue.
I never really thought that I had to prove anything because I had already arrived. I'd say in the beginning, when I felt left out from earlier things in my childhood, those things definitely were weighing on my mind and my heart, like all through my younger years. But I would say that I didn't have to prove anything at a point because I knew who I was and I knew what I brought to the table. And I think that just intimidates a lot of people. And people are very uncomfortable with girls or women who know exactly what they want,
Yes. Intimidation. Intimidation is a big factor that we will also address. When someone is perceived as bossy or perceived as a control person dominated by control, as you're explaining your situation to me, and has a lifelong deal that you were giving control, and that you use that control to help your family situation, to help your maid, to help your mom, dad, the whole situation that you explained to me at home. That is something that is very difficult to release when you've done it in grade school, grammar school, and then also in college. That's something that's not easily left behind. So that's where you and a lot of work to do. But don't be worried, we can do it. That's the work that we are going to do. And those issues can be resolved. Those issues can be dealt with. Those issues can be solved. And we will do that together.
People did describe me as too intense. You're correct, they did. They did describe me as too intense, and I don't really understand why. I think people are just intimidated by strong women. I really have just chalked it up to that my entire life. They just don't understand a strong woman. They don't get it. And that's okay. Not everyone is able to comprehend that at a higher level. That's acceptable. When I look back and I think about these experiences, they do parallel to the workplace. Of course, everyone probably has some sort of dark childhood trauma that's locked in there because their parents couldn't afford to take them to Cabo on vacations and things like that. So I do understand that there are a lot of parallels and that I have some things that I need to probably work on.
Yes, I agree. There are a lot of people who have issues with strong women, where if the man had that same exact personality or the management mindset or the management skills or assets, whatever you want to call them, sometimes when it's a man, it's looked at positive. When it's a woman, it's looked at as negative. So I do understand. I sympathize. But there also comes a point where you, as the individual who wants to get along in different situations, you have to know when to pull back, when to go forward. You can't always do both. So that's something that can also be learned. That's something that can be learned little by little. These techniques, these skills, these abilities, these workarounds can also be helpful in personal relationships. So what we're going to work on, and now I have a game plan that I will get in place so that you and I can work on more of these issues together.
Mm. By high school, I was president of the debate team. I ran and started from the ground up 3 different charities around our campus. And I also was president of the female golf team, which I always really enjoyed that. And I wanted to go into golf my entire life, ever since I was a small child. I was obsessed with the PGA Tour and begged my parents every year to take me to the Masters and things like that. And I just fell in love with it. And I, always dreamed of marrying a famous pro golfer and, having kids with Rory McIlroy or somebody to that level. But, certain things don't turn out that way. And sometimes your parents aren't very supportive of your sports dreams, and sometimes they force you to go into business. And I just feel like everything has worked out the way that it needed to. But circling back, high school, we were all who we were at that point, and middle school is where you figured those things out. And I feel like high school is really just preparation for college. So that's when, I decided to focus on that instead.
And I do understand. Focusing on situations where, but it leads back to your same control issues. Focusing on situations that you can completely control is helpful. But there are also skills needed because a lot of times we can't control everything. And majority of the time we can't control everything. We make our plans and we need to be able to pivot if necessary. If something doesn't go the way we expect it to go, or you get thrown a curveball, you need to be able to, duck, bob, and weave, as they used to say in the old days, to handle the situation. And that's a skill that can be learned. All of these skills we're working on are going to be skills that you can learn to help you move forward in your situation that we're dealing with today. And again, the reason you're here, the court-appointed therapy. These situations will give you the skills necessary to continue to move forward.
I'm going to be honest, I did start to anticipate situations before they happened because I just assumed that I knew better. That's probably not a nice thing to admit, but I will admit that to you. I feel like I knew the same people. When you go to private school with the same 100 kids your entire life, you know them up and down and in and out. And I knew these kids. I knew to anticipate their every move, the here and there, what they would say, who would get invited to what. And, I just decided to go ahead and be proactive before conflicts would arise. For example, I remember one year, there was a specific girl at our school whose birthday party I would never get invited to. And so I went ahead and prepared a charity function that weekend for the school's beta team, and we had this giant car wash planned, and I planned it the same weekend because I didn't think that I would be invited to that party. And then with a strange turn of events, my father started working with that girl's father, and so he made her invite me to the party. And I was kind of caught between a rock and a hard place because the party was the same day as the car wash, and it really caused an issue because I just was dead set on, you know, um not being invited. And then also, as a small child, I would write and address thank you notes before I even received a gift. And then the embarrassing thing about that is when you have to go in and use whiteout to white out what the gift was or the cash amount that you received. And sometimes that's a little humiliating. So I do think that I would prepare before I knew the outcome, and sometimes that was a little embarrassing.
And yes, I can understand the embarrassment element of ultimately trying to have control over situations where you don't have control. And especially when it comes to light and there's really nothing you can say that puts you in a clearer light where you'd be more acceptable to the people who now are pointing fingers at you and saying, you can't control me. Basically, that's what they're saying. A lot of times it's put in a nicer way, but that's what they're saying. You can't control what I do. I am in control of myself. And that's something that, again, a skill that can be learned that you and I will work on together, because there's only one person you can control, and that's yourself. So that's going to be our goal. That's going to be our target. That's going to be our working point that we need to get to so that you can accept that you are the person who can control you. That's where we need to get. And that's where we will get, because we're going to work on this and we're going to come to a situation where you understand it, we both understand it, and you're going to accept that.
I always did try to stay ahead of everything. I turned my homework in on time. I would do projects. If we were given a month to complete the project, it would only take me 4 days. And then I would try to help others with their projects. Most of the time they didn't want my help, which was fine. But that's what I would do, normally. And it just was hard. Oh, um, you know, it has been a challenge for me my entire life to always not reveal all of the information. It's like a secret, like you just want to tell everyone what's going on, but sometimes things are meant to be kept private, and sometimes people's careers are at stake. And when you involve yourself with somebody who's, let's say, a substitute teacher and you're a minor and they're not, some things like that, they can get really out of hand and complex, and you really just have to watch out for yourself. And I feel like I've been protecting myself and protecting other people for a very long time. So I can see how some of the circumstances that I was in high school and probably beyond are quite parallel to what I'm going through currently.
Yes, that's very true. A lot of times the situations that you build up or the way you handle problems start as you're a child, like you talked about 8, 9, 10 years old. You went to grammar school, you went to high school, those situations were still there. Sometimes you have control that you needed or you wanted. And other times you start to learn that, no, I can't control this. And then when people start to shun you and stay away from you and not invite you to the parties, then you start to realize, hey, maybe the way I'm dealing with people is there's something wrong with it. And sometimes people don't realize that. And they don't realize, see, the beauty for you right now is that you are telling me that you understand there's something different. There's something that needs to be worked on. You're not just saying this is who I am and this is how I'm going to stay. You can control those situations. And that's what we'll work on. That's what we're going to work on together, you and I. We're going to let you understand that it doesn't have to be like this. It doesn't have to be like this. And so that's where we get down into the hard work, as I like to say.
I did have to uphold my reputation at all costs. So whether people liked me or not, I had a certain image to uphold. I was perfect. And things didn't get to stay that way. So I was very good about keeping secrets. I was very good with being consistent. I was very good with monitoring myself and others, and which is probably why, I have a control issue, and which is potentially why I'm here right now. But as you can see, due to my trust issues and my work ethic, things have been hard. I do feel like I had to work harder than other people, from the time I was a kid and just not being in the same place as everyone else in my peer group and just not having the same advantages. When people talk about not having the same advantages, it really is something. I deeply identify with all of the people out there who are, first generation college students and people that come from nothing, because there is nothing more disappointing than having to vacation at the Cape with your nanny who goes home every night and comparing yourself to people who have a lot more than you. It's just really upsetting. I'm so sorry.
No, 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 no. I understand. Don't be sorry. I understand that issue that you talked about your nanny is really deep seated. So that might be where we're going to go in the next session. We're going to go deep. We talked a little bit today about you very young, 8, 9, 10. We talked about you in high school. We talked about you in college. And then we got to the big issue we touched on a little bit about you in the work environment and the situation that brought you here to court-appointed therapy. So we're going to go back. We're going to break these down. As I like to say. We're not going to try to do them all at once. That is not useful. That is not productive. Not going to happen, as they used to say. So we're going to go back in our next session. We're going to go back to 8, 9, and 10. And we're going to revisit that. And we're going to see how those was the building blocks, how those situations were the building blocks of where you are right now. And that's going to give us some insight. And that insight is going to help us get to the point where we want to get to move forward.
My whole life when people pulled away from me, I always felt, like I've said before, that it was because they were jealous. And I feel like for a long time that provided the clarity that I was looking for, but now I'm just really not sure. Yeah. Looking back, I think I was responding to situations out of wanting to control. That's probably what this all is spiraling down to, is my obsession with needing to be in control.